The silence came first. It was a deep, unsettling quiet that fell over our cities. The constant hum of traffic vanished. The rumble of distant trains disappeared. The skies, once crisscrossed with the white trails of jets, became a vast, empty blue. We had always lived with noise, the soundtrack of a world in perpetual motion. Now that motion had ceased. The world held its breath, and we stood frozen in the sudden calm, a calm that felt more like a storm gathering just over the horizon. The stillness was not peaceful, it was a warning. A sign that the machine we had built to sustain us had finally ground to a halt. Then came the emptiness. Grocery store shelves, once overflowing with choices from every corner of the globe, were stripped bare in days. First the bread and milk, then the canned goods, then everything else. What was left were hollow aisles and the faint, lingering scent of food that would not be restocked. Pharmacies ran out of essential medicines, gas stations went dry, their pumps useless relics of a bygone era. The arteries of our civilization, the highways, the shipping lanes, the railways, were now just empty vessels. It was a silent, creeping collapse. People's faces reflected the shock. In the beginning there was confusion, then a rising tide of panic. We had built our lives on a foundation of convenience. We never truly understood the lifeline. It was an invisible river of goods flowing constantly around us day and night. Think about it, that apple in your hand, it likely traveled hundreds, maybe thousands of miles. It was picked, sorted, packed, and loaded onto a truck. That truck drove across states using fuel that was drilled, refined, and transported from somewhere else entirely. The same was true for everything, your clothes, your phone, the batteries in your flashlight. We lived at the end of a very long, very complex chain of dependencies. A chain so strong we thought it was unbreakable, yet so fragile it shattered almost overnight. The breakdown was simple, it was a domino effect. When one part of the supply chain failed, the others quickly followed. A fuel shortage meant trucks couldn't run. Without trucks, warehouses couldn't ship goods to stores. Without goods, stores had nothing to sell. It didn't stop there. Without fuel, factories couldn't get raw materials to make new products. Farmers couldn't run their tractors to plant or harvest crops. Power plants couldn't get the parts they needed for repairs. Every single link in the chain was vital, and we had taken every single one for granted. The system was designed for efficiency, not resilience. The entire modern world was built on the principle of just-in-time delivery, a system where everything arrived exactly when it was needed. This efficiency became our greatest vulnerability. There were no stockpiles, there were no reserves. When the deliveries stopped, the buffer was gone in an instant. The first instinct was to look for what was lost. People scavenged, hoping to find a forgotten can of soup. But soon, a new instinct kicked in, the instinct to create. The most valuable real estate was no longer a corner office, but a patch of sunny ground. Lawns, once meticulously manicured for show, were dug up and transformed into vegetable gardens. Balconies and rooftops became home to pots of tomatoes, beans, and potatoes. Every square inch of soil became a potential source of life. This wasn't a hobby anymore, this was survival. It was the backyard revolution, a quiet but determined fight for self-sufficiency. Water became more precious than gold. We had always turned a tap and expected it to flow. Now we learned to see rain not as an inconvenience but as a gift. Barrels were set up under every drainpipe to catch the runoff. We learned simple filtration methods using layers of sand, charcoal, and cloth to purify water. Skills, not possessions, became the new currency. The accountant who knew how to mend a fence was more valuable than the one with a forgotten stock portfolio. The teacher who could identify edible wild plants was more respected than the executive. People dusted off old toolkits and remembered lessons from their grandparents. We learned to repair things instead of replacing them. We learned to preserve food through canning, drying, and pickling. We learned basic first aid, carpentry, and how to sharpen a blade. The change was profound. It was a shift away from being passive consumers to becoming active producers. We were no longer just mouths to feed. We were hands that could plant, build, and fix. With the formal economy gone, a new one rose from its ashes. It was older, simpler, and built on a foundation of human connection. This was the age of barter. Money was worthless. What mattered was what you had and what you could do. A jar of honey could be traded for a handful of handmade nails. A few hours spent mending a neighbor's roof could earn you a bag of potatoes. The marketplace was no longer a sterile building with cash registers. It was a handshake on a street corner, a conversation over a garden fence. Value was direct, tangible, and negotiated between people. Trust became the most important commodity of all. In a world without contracts or legal systems, your word was everything. Communities began to form informal trade networks. A designated day of the week might become market day, where people would gather to trade their surplus goods. You would see someone with a cart full of fresh eggs bartering with someone who had learned to repair shoes. It was slow, inefficient, and beautiful. It was commerce with a human face. These new communities became our safety net. We learned to pool our resources and our skills for the common good. The man who was a brilliant mechanic would fix the community's tools in exchange for a share of the harvest. The woman who was a nurse would run a small clinic, tending to injuries in exchange for food and protection. We began to understand that individual survival was difficult, but community survival was possible. This system forced us to reevaluate what was truly valuable. A flashy car was just a useless hunk of metal, but a sturdy wheelbarrow was a priceless tool. We started to appreciate craftsmanship, durability, and utility above all else. The new economy wasn't about accumulating wealth, it was about ensuring well-being. This shift from me to we was perhaps the most significant change of all. Surviving in this new world requires a fundamental shift in mindset. You must become a problem solver. Your first priority is the rule of threes. You can survive 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. Secure your water source first. Learn to harvest rainwater and purify it. Next, focus on food. Start small. Even a pot of herbs on a windowsill is a beginning. Learn to identify a few edible plants in your area. Store what you can, but focus on creating a sustainable source. Every calorie you produce yourself is a victory. Adaptability is your greatest weapon. The world is no longer predictable. You must learn to be flexible, to improvise, and to make do with what you have. A broken tool is not trash, it's a source of spare parts. An old piece of clothing can become patches, cordage, or a filter. Look at everything around you not for what it was, but for what it could become. This creativity is essential. Those who cling to the old ways will not last. But the most important survival tool is not a knife or a fire starter, it is hope. In the face of overwhelming challenges, it is easy to give in to despair. But hope is the fuel that drives human resilience. Find it in the small things, the first sprout pushing through the soil, the taste of a freshly picked tomato, the laughter of children playing in a quiet street. Celebrate small successes, a repaired fence, a full water barrel, a successful trade. These are the building blocks of a new life. Hope is a choice you must make every single day. It is the belief that tomorrow can be better, and that you have the power to help make it so. This is not an end, it is a new beginning. The great stillness stripped away the complexities of the modern world, forcing us to rediscover what truly matters. We are learning to live in harmony with the seasons, not just the clock. We are rebuilding our communities based on trust and mutual support. It is a harder life without question, but in many ways it is a more meaningful one. We are no longer cogs in a machine we don't understand. We are gardeners, builders, and pioneers, laying the foundation for a slower, quieter, and more resilient world, brick by brick.